Okay, when last month I met a guy called Carson, and I met him, and now you should see a beautiful picture of San Francisco with a nice Golden Gate Bridge. I met a guy from San Francisco who has a startup. Now, like we just learned, everyone in San Francisco has its own startup, and his startup was about security, a security solution. It was called Cloud Passage. It's a security solution for when you have your infrastructure in the cloud, like we do. And we were talking, and it's something we will have some deficits in, and so it was a really interesting talk where he told me how we could use that, and we were discussing it, and it really sounded interesting. And when we came to the end of the talk, he was really getting a little bit anxious because he thought he could get a new customer, and we could use their solution. In the end, I told him, well, yes, sounds very interesting. I can point you to the guys who decide that in our company, who are responsible for doing that stuff. And of course, he was a bit disappointed because he thought he already closed that, and I'm the CTO of our company, so he kind of had the impression that I was able to decide that. And this is like the main idea of Agile for me, that you give individual responsibility. Here's our Golden Gate Bridge. That you give the individual responsibility to the teams, and this is what I want to talk about today, how we do that and how that works in a hardcore way, the Agile hardcore way. To start out, let me tell you a little bit about our company. We're Wooga. We're building games, casual social games, for the second best social network in the world, called Facebook. And as well for iOS and so on. We have right now around 50 million monthly active users who play our games, so we're pretty happy with that. And we have all these independent games teams who work on these different games. And we have a very strong culture towards Agile. I want to tell you how we came up with that. And we have to go back a long way for that. We have to go back to my first company. When I first started working in 2001, I started in a company, another startup, which grew from 80 to 800 people over time. So it grew really quite a lot to a big company, and I was in charge of everything which is like organizing technology, QA, project management, technical operations, and all that stuff. And after a couple of years, we really got slow. We had an IT team of 80 to 100 engineers, but we had the feeling that there's no feature coming out of it because we had this huge core platform and like everything was stuck and nothing was really going on. So we thought, well, let's be smart. Let's get a really good external consultant for a huge amount of money, and let's establish some processes to get that better. And we established these processes. We had like every feature categorized into bugs, change requests, features, projects. We had a lot of different roles: architects, project managers, QA, consultants, business guys, technical project managers, and so on. And wrote a big handbook as well, and implemented all of that. Took half a year to get everything working. And after we did that, we looked at what we've done, and if we got like better with the feature output and with the way we developed our software and the speed we developed our software. And we saw it was a complete failure. We didn't get faster at all, and people didn't get happier because you had all these dependencies. You had to run through these processes, and nothing really worked out. Nothing really was any better. So, well, we stuck there, and I left the company pretty soon afterwards, and spent some time really going through the theory as well of how to actually work Agile and how to actually, what we did wrong and what didn't work out about how we did it. And I came up with the idea to really focus more and go back a little bit more to the core and to the actual idea of what Agile means and what it means to build your software in this Agile way. And this is what I talk about. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly how to implement that in your own company or what that actually is, but what I will tell you is a bit of the compromises and the implications it has to really focus your company more on this Agile thing. But still, for a start, I'm going to tell you a little bit like the theory behind Agile, and it's 4 points. 4 points I want to tell you which make up an Agile process. The first one is people over processes. This is like, there is this Agile manifesto, and it has these 4 different points. And the first one, and the most important about Agile, is people over processes. Which means, yes, you can have some processes because you have some recurring tasks always, and you have to structure them. But it's important that your people can always take the decision and change that and do it differently and do it the way they think it's right. And it's about the people doing the right thing. It's not about the process driving you and telling you what to do. Now, this is actually the most important thing, no? Second thing about Agile is working software. You always have working software, no? You iterate, and you don't follow this waterfall approach where you specify, and then you implement, and then you test, and then you release. That's not the right way, but you have to iterate all the time. And every week, or at most bi-weekly, release a new software, show it to your people, test it, go over it, and see if you're still on the right track, if you're still actually doing what you plan to do. Third thing about Agile is a collaboration over negotiation. Meaning if there's something going wrong, if like the product is not in sync with the IT and the result is not where you actually want it to be, you have to collaborate, you have to sit together and solve the problem. And you can't fall back to a negotiation like some contract or email you had before where you agreed on as is, and then you fall back and say like, hey, but you told us 2 weeks ago it's supposed to be this way, and now it's that way, and you have to live with it or something like this. No, this is a very important point. And the fourth point is responding to change over following a plan. You always, in a complex environment like software engineering, you will never be able to really know before how it's going to look in the end. You will always have changes along the way. There's just no way to know now how your product is going to look in the end, especially with games, but it's exactly the same on all other products, websites, services, and so on. So you have to be always willing to change and to adapt to what's actually going on. And these are like the core fundamental parts of Agile. Now, me, as kind of the manager, now, what can I do to establish an Agile culture in my company? Because I can't really establish processes, no? Because you just have learned that processes are not the core is the people. So what we'll do is we establish an environment where we try to create a place where you can work Agile. And here I have like three points for you, which what we try to do to establish this environment. The first one is, of course, independent teams. It's like independence. You have to create the teams that can focus on the work. And the teams are not like part of a hierarchy where they just go down and are like steered from above. But the team, on our side, the games team, is completely independent. They don't have to ask me or Jens, our CEO, about how to do the game. Our job is to put the team together and then to trust them and let them build the game. And second thing, very closely connected to that, is a very high individual responsibility. The worst thing I believe you can have in a company is a lot of dependencies. Dependencies kill everything, no? Because when you can't decide anymore, but you have to ask this guy, and then you have to go through this process and so on before you finally can do something. A lot of people I talk to on big companies complain about exactly that thing. No, they can't do anything when you're at Telecom, Siemens, whatever, because you're like in this big dependency network where you're not able to decide and to actually do something. And the third thing is communication. Obviously, that stuff only works if you can communicate and if you sit together as a team where you can talk, because talking and communicating is the core of all of it. So you have to be in one room, really being distributed all over the world doesn't work that well, and you have to sit together and being able to talk to each other. So this is my Agile intro, and now the core of my talk is, what does it mean for your company? What implications does it have? Because it's actually no free lunch. No, you don't get Agile for free. And I've seen it a lot of times that people just rebrand their project managers to Scrum Masters and then have a daily stand-up every morning and think, now we're Agile. And that's not really it. There are a couple more things to do about it. Well, let me get a sip of water first. First thing, being here, avoiding team leads. At Wooga, we don't have any team leads in the IT. Means that I have actually around 40 direct reports, and I'm doing a lot of feedback talks all the time, talking to people, because that's my main job, basically. We don't do that because it doesn't fit with this individual responsibility I just talked about before, that it doesn't work if you have like a team where the team leader is basically having his 4 people or 5 and deciding for them what each of them has to do all the time. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to put the project together and especially let the engineers build their stuff. But, and here we come to the first problem, I had a feedback talk with one of our engineers. We was at Wooga for 2 years now, last week, and we were discussing, and he actually liked it, and he was very happy about what we're doing. But his problem was, he was asking me, "But Philip, like, where can I go? What's kind of my perspective? Because what you don't get at Wooga is you don't become a team lead after 3 years because you don't have any, no? How can you become a team lead? We're not a big fan of titles as well, so I mean, you can call yourself senior if you want to someday, but it doesn't really change anything. I mean, you get, of course, more money and more, and you get like a higher standing or like a higher, you become cooler over time, but you don't really become a team lead. So I could not give him like this path. So if you're agile, you basically build a company and a team that's built for the moment, for working on that specific project. You don't build for like that in 4 years you're team lead, and in 10 years you're department head, and in 100 years you're CTO or something. That's not the way it works with Agile. No? The way it works is that you try to create an environment where you can build a product in a perfect way. But it's not that easy for everyone. It's not actually the right thing for everyone, because some like this clear, often like you get it in state companies where you go like these clear steps up. This is not the way it can work in Agile teams. Second implication or stuff you have is roles. I already mentioned that a little bit. Agile, since you have so much individual responsibility, and because dependencies are evil, you have to be able to wear a lot of different hats, and you have to be pretty broad in what you can do. You have to be engineer, but you have to be architect as well. You have to be business consultant. You even have to be tester, because you have to do all that stuff yourself. There are not different roles for that. And this, again, has some implications. And here, again, I have an example for you. I was interviewing a guy a couple of weeks ago who was a great engineer. He was in another company, and he was responsible for test automation. And the ones of you who like are a little bit in IT recruiting know that this is something that's really tough to find. You usually don't find people who love tests and automated testing. Most people want to do software, and tests is, a lot of people say it's really super important, but not too many love to focus on that. And he was really into that, building tests, and having a team which was responsible on that platform to build all of the tests. And we were discussing, and I think he was a great guy, but I couldn't see a position for him within Wooga. I couldn't see a way how he could fit into our teams, because he wanted to stay with that. He wanted to stay with test engineering, and there was just no way for us to come together. And this is like the problem you run into, that you can't fit everyone in your company. No? You have to have more generalists, and there are some people you can't just hire. My third one is, I already mentioned that, avoid processes. And this one sounds easier than it is. And I have a nice example for you as well. And there was a discussion we had about 2 weeks ago with our HR team, now our recruiters. Where do you put your recruiters? Do you put your recruiters, because we do a lot of recruiting, we're growing pretty fast, do you put them inside of these games teams? Or do you have like a core recruiting team? And we had this nice discussion on the whiteboard, and we had like the pros and cons. And on the pro side for having like the general recruiting team was, it's more efficient because the recruiters, you have a product recruiter for all teams. You have a better candidate experience because every candidate goes to the product recruiter. And you have a better knowledge sharing. So all this, like these more or less like pragmatic arguments. On the other side, it was like having the recruiters in the team is more in line with our culture. And it's more agile. And it's and all that like soft stuff. And I really believe that we have to put the recruiters in the team, but it was not an easy discussion. It was not an obvious thing that you say, hey, that's totally clear. But you will have to go, and there are a lot of examples for this, where you have to take responsibility away from these common and over whatever the word is, übergreifend in German, the overreaching things, and put them into the teams. And don't go through processes where a lot of departments are concerned. It makes sense, but in the reality, when you have the discussions, it's not always easy. There's always people who would like to have more responsibility in their part. And the last thing, I like that slide, is smart people. All this stuff doesn't, there are a lot of people, you have to be pretty smart, like intellectually, especially as a software engineer, but even more when you have so many responsibilities and so many things you're in charge of and you have to do and you have to take care. And of course, this limits the pool of people that can work for you. That limits your recruiting options, and it makes it a lot harder to find the right people for your team. And this is not an easy thing. I mean, every company says, hey, you only want the coolest and best people out there. But if you focus on this agile, it's getting even more difficult. And you have to put even more emphasis into recruiting. Yeah. So what does it, where can we conclude that? Agile is no free lunch. But we had a party, we had a company party last Friday where we were celebrating a couple of our latest milestones, and a lot of people came to me, and I hear that over time, often and often again, and really said that we have a great environment and that it's a lot of fun to work in this environment. And that did not happen to me before. And I don't think they only say that because I'm the CTO and they want to be like in a good position for our next discussion. So I really have a feeling people are really very engaged and they really love working in an environment. And even more important, our feature throughput is actually better than with every other team I've been working before. So the output, and that's the most important thing for any company that's building products. Now the output we get is really a lot higher than all the other forms of organization I have worked before. And this is why I would ask you all to be more agile in the organizations that you're working in. Thanks. I have